Call to order the October 25th, 2022 Finance Committee regular meeting. Would you call roll, please?
Chairman Reinhardt,
Here.
Vice Chairman Hoagland,
Present.
Member Streeter,
Here.
Member Brooks,
Here.
Member Iglesias. Member Iglesias is absent.
No call that you're aware of or emails?
No.
All right. First order of business is if you guys can take a minute or so to review. There's 3 packets for our July budget meeting. You can go through them, and once you have done so, I would make a motion, recommend it for a motion, and just include it, just motion for all 3. So we can approve them and move on.
I would make a motion, we accept them as presented to us.
I have a recommendation for approval for the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, there is no previous business, so we have Scott on the phone. Scott, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone.
Good
I
evening.
guess we are officially in the evening now, so before we get started, I guess I'll just see if you have any questions or concerns. Otherwise, I'll just do a brief market economic update, and then I will just switch over to the board report, which is much more condensed than the entirety of the quarterly performance report. So any questions or concerns before we get started?
Nope, everyone's looking good, so an overview would be
Okay,
fine.
and from an audio standpoint, can everyone hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
All right, perfect. I'm losing my voice, so I'll try to go quickly. The first part that I'm going to do, the market and economic update, we're not going to be looking at slides. I'll basically just give you an overview on the current situations. A lot of the current market themes that have been relevant over the last, let's say, 3 to 4 quarters are still very relevant. The U.S. economy is still characterized by persistent high inflation. Really, no matter what indicator we're looking at, either consumer price index, producer price index, or personal consumption expenditure, even looking at GDP, and I'll reference that in a bit here, but we're still looking at numbers year over year that are at historically high levels in that 30 to 40 year range. We've seen some improvement in the last few months, but it tends to go back and forth. That's why the Fed has continued to state that everything is going to be data-driven as we move forward. They're going to remain very aggressive. We do have an upcoming FOMC meeting November 1st and 2nd. All expectations are for another 75 basis point rate hike. We will have another meeting it's December 13th and 14th. So projections right now are leaning towards that 50 basis point rate hike. But for all intents and purposes, some other characteristics of the economy, we have the housing market deteriorating. That really goes in line with the fact that mortgage rates have more than doubled year to date. As the Fed continues to raise rates, obviously mortgage rates are going to continue to increase as well. We are starting to see a significant slowdown in that area. Also, you're starting to hear this discussion and we'll continue to hear this. Are we entering a recession? Are we in a recession? For all intents and purposes, there's really two indicators. Well, I guess one would be a definition. The other one would be an indicator. By definition, when we have two consecutive negative readings for GDP, quarterly readings, that would be defined as a recession. So in Q1 of this year, we had a negative 1.6% reading. In the second quarter, the third and final estimate that came in was a negative 0.6%. So by definition, we are either near or in or entering a recession. Again, this is going to be data dependent as we move forward. Another indicator that is often looked at that from a historical perspective has always been fairly accurate is when we have an inverted yield curve. And typically that's just when the 2-year Treasury is yielding more than the 10-year, which we've actually been in that trading pattern now for probably about 2 months. So those two indicators by themselves are kind of leaning towards that recession area. Bloomberg has their economists that have made projections. I think roughly they're in that 50% range for an upcoming recession in the following year. Some are a little bit further out, but I think that's a pretty good snapshot on the economy by itself. The labor market continues to be very strong. The September numbers that came in, the unemployment rate was at 3.5%. The prior month, it was a slightly higher reading at 3.7. Non-farm payrolls came in at 263,000 jobs added. Estimate was for 275, so pretty much right in line. Labor force participation rate moved slightly, 62.3. That was a slight downtick there, but for all intents and purposes, the labor market remains very strong. So that part of the Federal Reserve mandate is essentially off the table. They have already stated that they'll be very comfortable allowing the unemployment rate to get up to a level of probably 4.4 to 4.5% next year, as long as the inflationary numbers are continuing to come down. So again, very fluid market. We're going to have to continue to monitor it as we do. Another current market theme we're very well aware of, the Federal Reserve has been extremely active. Just in the second quarter, they raised rates 150 basis points. I think we're all very aware of the inverse relationship. When the Fed is raising rates, the market value of any fixed income security has an inverse relationship. So in the interim, we do see unrealized losses, but when and if they're held until maturity, you're going to get your principal back. And certainly in the meantime, we're going to have improved interest income along the way. Now, another thing that's changed, the Fed has stated that they're probably going to be roughly around 4.5% by the end of the year. They may approach up to 5% towards the mid part of next year. Again, these are all going to be very fluid and data dependent. Outside of that, we're still dealing with the Russia-Ukraine war. That's in the 6th month already. That continues to exacerbate quite a few of the supply chain bottlenecks from an agricultural standpoint to even semiconductor chip manufacturing. A lot of people are not aware that roughly 90% of the semiconductor grade noble gases actually come from Ukraine. So that in itself has caused a significant bottleneck with that particular supply chain. which affects primarily used cars and the new car industry, plus anything tech-oriented that would require a semiconductor chip. But for the most part, I think that would be a pretty good synopsis of the economy. If there are no questions there, I'll go ahead and jump over to the board report.
I've got a quick little question, mainly for
Sure.
Wendy and Jeffrey, is that as we're looking at now potentially the 2 consecutive quarters approaching recessionary, how does that impact on our budget and so forth for next year? Are we too early to be looking at any changes or?
No.
I believe I caught most of that. With the upside of what we're able to do right now, we still are able to navigate the volatile markets, even if we are entering, let's say, a recessionary period. As the Fed continues to hike rates, we are able to invest and reinvest at much more attractive rates than what we have witnessed over the last 2 or 3 years at a minimum. In the corporate space, we're actually reinvesting around 4%. Treasuries are considerably higher. A lot of the areas that we focus on, if we're looking for credit spreads, which would kind of give us an indication of where we can find value over treasuries, we're finding that in the corporate space. We're finding that in asset-backed securities. So to really answer your question, the recession is basically, it is what it is. It's a cycle in the economy. It's a cycle in the market. The market goes through this from a historical perspective every year. What we do, we will continue to find value in the market. And as we continue to invest at higher interest rates, that's going to dramatically reduce any unrealized losses that you're looking at. And also that's, as we move forward, we're going to be in a much better position, certainly from an income standpoint. So that is going to start to make a big difference. So that's kind of the silver lining, if you will, in the overall economy and whatever perception anyone has regarding the recession. At least from an investment standpoint, we're still able to find very attractive value and very attractive yields. Does that answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, somewhat. I was going to try and bring it down. Excuse my voice. I lost it out in the parking lot, but
We'll address how that affects our
Yeah,
budget when we
that's what
get
I'm
to the next section.
assuming, okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, are we good then?
Yes.
Yep, you can proceed.
Okay. A little hard to pick up from the speaker sometimes. I apologize. If there are no other questions, I'll transition to the board report.
That'll be good.
Okay. We can actually just move to slide 3 in the board report. This will kind of give us a synopsis from a compliance standpoint. If we're looking at page 3, which should be the sector allocation analytics, are we all good there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So really what this shows us, it's a bar chart. We have the gray portion of the bar would indicate the maximum level that is permitted by your investment policy. The blue shaded region would be where you were allocated at the end of September 30th of this year. And as you can see, just a quick visual takeaway, for all of the various sectors within the fixed income arena, we have a very healthy buffer. The only area that you're approaching a maximum would be Florida Prime, which, for all intents and purposes, where yields are at on the short end of the curve for a lot of the LGIPs or other pools that we're looking at, the rates are very attractive. So, that makes quite a bit of sense to me as well. But again, from a compliance standpoint, from the diversification area, you're in great shape. If we move to page 4, again, this would be another compliance slide, if you will. This is the max maturity analytics. And again, the gray portion of the bar would show the maximum maturities that are allowed by your investment policy for each of these specific sectors within the fixed income arena. And the blue shaded region would be essentially the average maturity for each of those within that category. So again, just a quick visual takeaway, you're in great shape there as well. So from a compliance standpoint, everything is right in line with where we should be. If we move to page 6, which will be a portfolio snapshot of the core portfolio, we can just take a look at the upper left quadrant of this particular page, portfolio statistics. You can see total market value as of September 30th, $152,278,193.43. You can see the portfolio effective duration of 1.95 years. The benchmark effective duration is 2.48 years. The benchmark is actually the ICE Bank of America Merrill Lynch 1 to 5 year U.S. Treasury Index. So you can see that the portfolio, we have taken a defensive posture where the duration of your portfolio is shorter than the benchmark because we're able currently to get much more attractive rates on the shorter end of the curve. So we realistically do not have to go further out, expose the portfolio to more interest rate volatility. So from that standpoint, we're looking at a defensive posture. If we look slightly below that, yield at cost, that is actually what the portfolio was yielding as of September 30th, 1.16%. Yield at market, that would be much more indicative and kind of give you a good reflection on how significantly rates and the fixed income market has changed this year, and really over the last 24 months. But yield at market, which is showing a 4.21%, that would be a good indication of if, in theory, on September 30th, we liquidated all of the holdings in the portfolio and then we went back into the marketplace and repurchased either identical or similar instruments, those are the yields that we would have been looking at. But obviously, the downside of that would have been you would have been looking at significant realized losses in the meantime. So that's really the trade-off there. It just shows you the difference between the two. Under that, you have AA for the portfolio credit quality, so a very high-rated portfolio in general. The upper right quadrant, sector allocation, you can see, again, a very conservative portfolio. The vast majority of the portfolios in U.S. Treasuries, 83%. You've got exposure to corporates, and then we looked at agencies, CMO, and asset-backed securities. And again, in the bottom right quadrant, that's just a duration distribution, which we've already pointed out on the upper left quadrant. And on the bottom left quadrant, those are ratings purely from Standard & Poor's. So again, the average credit rating for the portfolio is AA. If we move to page 7, this is typically a good indicator on how our portfolio managers are navigating the market, where they're finding value. Within your portfolio, there has not been a great deal of change. I know we inherited quite a few securities, so that limited us to a certain extent. But for the most part, some of the securities we have or plan to hold until maturity and then reinvest. But for the most part, you really have only noticed incremental changes from quarter to quarter. And page 8, Now, this is, I tried to set the background as best I can. Really, there's no place to hide in fixed income, and there's certainly no place to hide on the equity markets either. So, looking at the quarter, the portfolio had a negative performance of negative 1.52%. However, the benchmark was at a negative 2.28%. So, from that standpoint, we did still have a significant outperformance versus the benchmark. And even looking at things longer term over a 1-year period, the portfolio had a negative return of 5.72%, while the benchmark was at a negative 6.78%. So just to kind of put things into historical perspective, just in the first quarter of this year, even the 1 to 3 year Treasury index, which, you know, we're looking at the 1 to 5 for you, but the 1 to 3, that was the worst performance for the 1 to 3 year index since 1970. And then when we factored in the second quarter, that was the worst performance for that index for 2 consecutive quarters ever. So certainly it would be an understatement to say that we're navigating a very unique fixed income market. But again, to the best of our ability, our job is to still outperform the benchmark even in a down market, which obviously you can see that we are at least able to fulfill that portion of it, while also still trying to find value as we navigate through the market. And from that, those would be the prepared remarks I would have. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you do have any specific questions.
When do your benchmark numbers become relevant? I mean, and how long ago were they projected?
Those benchmarks would be at, basically they would reflect the date of the report that we give you. So everything would be as of September 30th. For instance, the quarterly performance report for the first quarter would be indicative of the close of the first quarter. So, so on and so forth. Everything is essentially as of the day that we're closing the quarter out.
Okay.
I have a question. You made a remark that you said you inherited some securities. What did you mean by that?
My apologies. If you could move the speaker closer. I didn't catch most of that. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
A little better, yes.
Okay. You made a remark that you inherited some securities. What did you mean by that?
Oh, when we took the portfolio over, there were already securities within the portfolio that, for the most part, we essentially, when we do take on a new client and there are existing holdings within the portfolio, we would basically talk to the portfolio manager that would be managing the portfolio to see, which ones would be in line with the strategy that we've discussed with you when we first agreed on a relationship. And then also we would look at any strategic movements that we could make for instance, if there were holdings that we could sell at a profit and then also reinvest that money at a very attractive yield, we would also do that. So when rarely do we take on a client that is just sitting in cash. If that, I think that would probably answer the question for you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so we just, when we do inherit securities in the portfolio, then we basically just have to make strategic movements going forward, and which particular securities can we hold, which ones do we think would we identify as potential transactions down the road where we could potentially find much more significant value. So that's really all I was pointing out there.
Thank you.
Sure. It's a great question. Thank you.
There's, looks like no more questions.
All right. I guess I either did a great job or a terrible job. I'm not sure.
You
Thank
did
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy your evening.
You do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. I don't know which one's Jeffrey with those name tags.
Oh, they're
but
backwards.
we'll figure it out.
I didn't even catch that.
Hey, I'd like to be the deputy.
Unisex financial.
No.
So like, the real Jeffrey,
Yes.
you're up.
Please stand up. Okay, we're here to present the highlights of the City of St. Cloud fourth quarter budget report. This is from July 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2022. Just as a note, these are unaudited, and, you know, we continue to make updates all the way up until the time of the audit in December, but they're pretty close. So here's our top 10 revenues through 100% of the year. So obviously, when it's over 100%, that means we actually took in more revenue than we budgeted for. So in almost all cases, collected almost 100% of our ad valorem. The 91% for public service utility taxes we're missing the month of September, and it will be in there tomorrow, so that will be near 100% as well. Impact fees, as you can see, 156%. So we had a very strong period of growth in the first 9 months of this last year, and we'll get to the last 3 months here momentarily. Any questions on this slide in particular?
No.
So the major fund revenues, once again, they're all close to or above 100%, with the exception of the building fund. Starting in about the middle of July, likely as a result of those increasing mortgage rates, our building permit activity has been greatly reduced. The month of September, we issued 36 building permits. It appears thus far in the month of October that we're about on the same track. The result of that is our building fund revenues on a monthly basis have been cut by 40 to 50%.
So on average, up until September, we are averaging 60 to 80 permits a month, or,
More like 80 to 100.
80 to 100, yes, sir.
yeah.
So
Okay.
we were making about total 320,000 per month. We've averaged about 170,000 over the past couple months. And through today, or through yesterday in October, we were about 125,000. So we're going to have some challenges with this fund. We've already met with the department to look at, taking some preventative measures, because this is an enterprise fund. So it has to at least break even. And with, the City Hall atrium still being in the process and those funds being encumbered, we're getting low on fund balance, available fund balance to support operations. So we're watching that one very closely.
And I'm going to give just an economic review after this whole presentation is about just the financial strategy of the city and the effects on, what the economy's having and the portfolio. I'll simplify what we all went through to keep it just common folk talk right now, so that we can be clear as mud, and I'll give you the economic projections. So once we complete this side.
Okay. The expenditures for the major funds through 100% of the year again, we generally are at 85 to 90% is kind of what we shoot for, because we're never staffed at 100%. But here in the city, we do budget at 100% of staffing. So in case like you're in a great department like finance that nobody ever leaves, we are staffed at 100% more oftentimes than not. And that applies to some other departments as well. So the one to note is the sanitation fund actually spent more than their budget. That will be rectified as part of budget amendment number 6, which is November 17th city council meeting. So we're having to pull funds from fund balance to add budget to the sanitation fund. They had a challenging year for vehicle repairs, vehicle fuel, and thus they overspent what we anticipated. So depending on how their trucks hold up over the coming years, that could be another fund. Again, it's an enterprise fund that could reach a critical point at some point. So we are looking at some alternative billing mechanisms, such as potentially putting it on the tax rolls, much like Osceola County does. So that's all in the process. Any questions on this slide? Nope. This is the major fund surplus deficit. This excludes encumbrances, so this is actual revenues, actual expenditures. So the general fund took in $2.482 million more than it spent, and so on down the line. So the water fund actually spent more than they took in this particular year. That was mainly resulting from some investment in infrastructure as Toho started the process of taking over management of the water and sewer fund. The sanitation fund, again, they spent more than they actually took in this particular year due to the aforementioned items. And the building fund, that is mostly because of the expenditures resulting from the atrium. So prior to us starting the atrium, the building fund actually had too much fund balance. You can only carry a certain amount due to Florida statute. So we had too much, and that's where the building atrium kind of originated from. So as we spend, this is spending down our fund balance. I think there's still somewhere around $2+ million waiting to be spent out there. So
The good old
that's,
concept, spend it or lose it.
excuse me?
Like the good old thing, spend it or lose it.
That is correct. I mean, you have, at the time, we either had to encumber / expend it, which we did, or we would have had to look into some kind of a refund mechanism because the building fund can't carry too much money. That's not the purpose of it, so. General fund expenditures by department. This will just show you how much each department spent of their original budget amount. Most of the amounts that are lower, like information technology, planning and zoning, that's due to being understaffed, unable to fill vacancies, at quite the rate that they would have wanted to. So that's the majority of that. I do have to, I wish the police chief was here, but point out that the police department spent 97.4% of their budgeted funding. So they did a really good job keeping their hiring up, getting other things expended in a timely manner. So this is kind of like the Price is Right. You get close to 100 without going over. So hats off to police as well as fire, hit 90% as well. So as a whole, where the general fund was just about 83%. We'd like to be a little bit higher than that, but, you know, the better we
Refresh me
do.
again on the city council, why there is such a budget there, and I know we've covered
That's
this.
usually due to city council contingency. That leftover funding actually had to do with a pending legal settlement that ended up getting paid another way, not through the city council budget. But generally speaking, that's because city council doesn't spend their contingency. That's why, because they budget for those emergency type of items, and hopefully we never spend that.
Question, when we have these amendments to take from reserves or whatever, why aren't we tapping into that?
Actually, the only budget amendment that is part of the general fund, this next budget amendment, number 6, we could, actually, we're taking it from the building maintenance, public works and building maintenance, but we could have taken it from there as well. So we're not actually, for this last budget amendment, we're not using prior year fund balance. So we're just moving it between departments. So we're not using any extra money, so to speak. But the other part of the budget amendment is other funds. This is just general fund.
When you say that you would have had to refund some of the other funds since they didn't use as much, how would that work?
No, that's only in the building fund, sir.
Oh, it's only in the building?
Right.
Okay.
The building fund, Florida statute says you can carry like two times your average last 3 years' budgets as a maximum, and if you get over that, then it starts to become an issue. But yeah, the general fund, you don't reimburse, or any other funds.
Yeah, I was just
They don't have a
wondering-
cap.
Yeah, I was just wondering, even in that building fund, if you say you had to refund that, what'd you do? Just disperse it in different ways?
That's why we didn't do that, because
It would have been a huge endeavor. What you do is all the permits and everything that came in, you would have to refund it back to the sources that initially brought in the money, which is a pretty big endeavor. The reason for that is that statute, it's an internal control really to make sure that a city never charges fees that surpass the expenditures they need. So that's the control right there. We don't want to gouge the residents. We want to just use enough to fund operations, and that's the concept behind it. So, but yes, we would have gone over, had to grab all transactions in, and it's a big undertaking because some developers and things have escrow accounts and, you know, are working through those items. So it's a pretty big endeavor, so we want to avoid it.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering how it would have got refunded, because that's huge.
Right, and normally, if we have any issues happening with that, like when we were in a surplus, it normally doesn't come from a resident. It's really your developers and builders who would come back and kind of sue and be like, hey, you know, what's going on with this, you know? So that's where we measure that the fees are appropriate to the operations that we need, so.
Any other questions on this slide?
I have one. The departments that made it close to 100% of their budget, is that due to overtime? Or you don't know how it's broken down?
Generally not. Like the police department, for example, they did spend overtime, but at the level that they budgeted for. So it wasn't like spending more on overtime than they originally planned. But yeah, most other police and fire are mainly the ones with overtime. Generally, nobody else has very little.
Okay.
So in summary, we had a good year. We are entering some potentially challenging economic times, you know, and I'll use this as a segue to my boss. The 1% surcharge is on the ballot. So, you know, that's a rather large source of revenue for us. if it doesn't get extended past 2025, so something to note. And then economic times have turned downward a little bit. Fortunately, a lot of our revenue is ad valorem, and that doesn't immediately change. Eventually, if valuations went down, and obviously growth is going down, so the amount of increase from year to year will probably not be as much as it was this year. And in past years, I believe it was about 12 or 13 years ago, our ad valorem revenues did go down year to year. So it is possible in, bad economic times. I believe that was 2008. That was way before my time. But we have the historical records, so we kind of have to, have a plan for that in case that were to occur. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Finance Director, Wendy Collazo.
I appreciate you. So I just kind of wanted to give just where we are, because, there's a lot of information going through, and never want to be a deliverer of bad news. It's more about the preparation we take. So we have taken, on the investment side, all the hoopla he said, bottom line, is that your benchmarks are set at about 2 years for full maturity, right, where we would be able to grab our principal, our cash money, and cash out. However, we're on a defensive by shortening that amount and then taking what we have and reinvesting it to get bigger yields. That's all it means. So we're using money to make money. Capitalism at its finest, and making sure that we're protected, because this isn't cash money, it's unrealized losses. Still causes me to lose sleep, because as you see the numbers. The other part that he noted there, I just wanted to make mention what he kind of meant, because if I get a little confused, everybody else might be a little confused, is that there was a loss. Regardless, you saw that, right, in all types of maturities. However, what he's saying is that we performed better, so the total loss was 5%. We performed at 3%, which is better. It's good news. We're in a better position than somebody losing above 5%. That's all that meant. So overall, I think we have $152 million of moving money that we're going to reinvest and invest as they come and mature to hopefully avoid unrealized losses, because they're pretty significant, right? And I think with the strategy we have, it's conservative yet viable and diversified enough that we're going to be able to mitigate this curve, okay? And something I was going to ask Scott to mention that he didn't was that if you hear the buzz of a mini recession, there is no such thing. We're either in or we're out, okay? And so this is really about how deep we're going to go into this gully. We don't project it to be a 2016, even 2008, but how far deep, and if we're going to navigate up through, I think we're in a position to do that. As far as revenue projections, some big things that we just, as finance professionals, have to keep in the preparation part of it is, like the deputy mentioned, the 1% sales tax. As you see, it brought in $6 million. Some of the reasons for its great performance has been because things like people ordering through Amazon in the county now can get taxed, and we get taxed, and we get that tax revenue. So that's helped, because guess what? I haven't met a person yet that doesn't order through Amazon. And so those delivery mechanisms are helping with the tax dollars. However, that is $6 million of infrastructure that helps us fund vehicles. If you remember your capital improvement plan, it's going to fund a portion of our fire station. So if the community does not continue that on, we have until 2025 to figure out where we're going to get potentially $6 million. And we're not going to have the money to just debt out, because we're going to need debt regardless to do public safety and your fire stations, but we need to kind of re-strategize then. I'm hoping we don't have to, because that's a big move that I would be lying to you if I said I had all the answers now, because it's a big shift. We're already structurally imbalanced by 7.5 mil, and now give me another 6. I mean, there's only so much. And that is because also we only have so many revenue sources, right? We have not raised the millage rate in, 8+ years, but we've doubled, tripled in labor costs. So those are factors, right? So to consider. The deputy has ran initial revenue amounts just to know where we're at. I can tell you right now, what I want you to keep in mind, one, the budget process is going to go earlier because we want to be proactive. So we're going to start doing capital in January. So we're going to finish with audit right now in December and start working with departments on capital and move it up to where normally we're meeting with you all in July. We might be meeting in maybe June, something earlier to be ready and mitigate that. We don't foresee any COLA right now at this time or any increases in salary because we just don't want to be in the position to overextend ourselves. My strategy right now that I'm kind of firm on right now is we need to hold and mitigate this and make sure that we can run operations. As the deputy noted, the building fund is, and he has strategized this great and very simple strategy of green, yellow, red. And the building fund is in hot orange right now. We're making moves to try to help them and alleviate and hopefully make this curve, right, in order to avoid any severe, changes in that category. But they do have to perform and got to afford their business. So we're working with them for different strategies, and we're in a position where I think we'll be able to mitigate that as best as we can, as this kind of comes through. As it's related to the budget, those are the impacts. Bills are paid by people by priority, and they like to have a roof over their head, and they like to have electricity, right? And they start cutting things like phone bills, car payments. Those are the first things to go. Well, we've done a lot. We've seen car payments. Unemployment is not high. It's about 3.5%, so that helps us out. But valuation of homes is going to take a hit for next year, as far as the valuation next year for the following year, but we like to be ready now. So overall, I think the temperature is somewhat of a reduction in revenue flow, and we don't, as you can see, at 83.2% in expenditures, we really don't want everybody to spend 100% because we get in trouble when people become very streamlined. However, you're looking at your big guys right there, public service, right, is at 90-something%. I want you to keep that cognizant that they're almost right there, and having extra or reserves because of understaffing or not being able to hire is not a financial strategy. It's something we do, and we use vacancies as a savings mechanism, but it's not a strategy that a department has. So while we need services, we need to be able to afford those services. So remember that, and we may need a call on additional revenue sources versus just cutting, right? Because that's my philosophy. I don't cut normally. It's just, we need to make sure revenue cylinders are on and we're performing. So not dire news, just letting you know that we are prepared and are preparing and are looking at this thing. We're getting data analytics to kind of tell us, hey, what are we projecting? Obviously in finance, we're always conservative. We are not nervous. Not even shaking just yet, we're just cautious. And that's kind of the tone when you start looking at budgets and things of that. We always want to give, but we have to stay within, I only have so much revenue, and this is going to be that year to really balance between, I can't give 20% raises if I don't have 20% increase in rev. You know what I mean? It's just business, right? So just consider that. But overall, like I said, I think that at least up to this point, no degrees are being shred, because I think we've done somewhat of our job to where we've mitigated, we've made it this far. I think we're in a position, like I said, to come up with good ideas that are long-term, to survive this, whatever this may be, because I don't think it's going to be a cut just like that. But we want to come out whole, right, and no impact to employees or the city. Yes, sir.
Quick. This is annoying, excuse me. With the, I do have a question.
No problem. I got time.
With the transfer of taking in or going into the Toho water, how does that impact then on our water service fees? Will we be getting any money at all, or is that all?
Yes, of course. So we get two types of payments from this transition. One of them is what is called the pilot payment, which is payment in lieu of taxes. Those are from your sales. So any sales within our, our jurisdiction, if you want to call it that, we're going to be getting that, which we project, and we've made a deal of no matter what happens, we get no less than $3 million bucks. right? And that's been worked out. So we project to exceed that just because of the rate of growth. We're averaging about 300 to 400 accounts a month of new accounts, and we'll get that revenue. The second part is in the first year of this transition, we are providing support to Toho like they are to us. And they'll be doing an admin allocation payment, which is close to $1 million, right around $800,000. They'll pay us for things like leases to use our space here at the JUF City Hall. Like I said, bucking around $838,000. It severely goes down the second year because they're going to want to get off, that support element. But we'll still be getting paid for things like fleet services. When we service the vehicles that they have, they'll be paying us for those services. Again, leases and rents for any of the JUF City Hall, we'll get that. And then again, our pilot payment. It'll incrementally go up, through negotiations through the years and stuff. That still hasn't been worked out, but we found it pretty lucrative, and it did not harm, anything that we had going on here. And we project to be seeing more than what we originally negotiated. And then we have that protection that in case this wheels come off this thing, we get $3 million no matter what. If it's anything similar to OUC and the electric when this happened, we've, again, if you saw the performance today from OUC, made much more than we projected just because of the growth of accounts and growth, right, itself. As the JPA continues to grow and we annex and we service those, that brings in more sales as well. So we should not have a negative impact as we've tried to do our homework with making sure they pay for services we render. We're also paying them for some services as they're billing things like our stormwater fees through their bill until we can get a mechanism to do so, or maybe put them on the tax rolls. So,
Another question on the new revenue source with the Amazon delivery taxes and so forth. Is that targeted for use in various departments, or is it how do we plan to use?
that goes into your existing revenue source. I just meant what was one of the drivers as to why we made a little bit more money than projected. One of those drivers was the use of Amazon. It goes into your 120 fund, which is your penny sales tax. And that is used for your Parks and Rec, public safety, as far as fire and police for their vehicles, and also any infrastructure like firehouses, or the public safety complex.
Again, I try and stay tuned to this, but I haven't seen a lot of advertisement or information about this, the importance of the voting for
We haven't
this.
seen a lot on.
So from the city managers and also our legal team, we cannot, as a municipality, advocate for those things. That's why we can send out information as far as what, and PIO has done this to send information what the 120 goes towards for the city, what it does for us, but we cannot advocate and pump out information to steer the vote, if you could call it that way. So we've done what we can legally and by the direction of our legal counsel, which is just to inform people, hey, this is what the money is used for. But we can't, like I said, pump out a lot of marketing and for that. So that's why you probably haven't seen that. But if you go to our website, PIO does put information as to what the money has gone through since 2011, what uses, so that the residents have a good idea of what we're trying to do. So
I see a lot of advertisement against it. And that's
Yes.
that's the frustrating part, because I understand what it's being used for, but the general public, I don't think they do.
yeah, I think there was a misconception, and as just to kind of provide some education how it works out. Normally, it kind of started a little bit by there's an interlocal agreement between the county, ourselves, and the city of Kissimmee. One of those is the school district that's included in that, and they get about 25% of the share of those taxes, which they don't really rate. They did because we created an interlocal and wanted to, I guess the interlocal helped them with that. A lot of people misinterpreted, I think, that thinking that there was a new tax that was coming. And it's an existing, sales tax on the state tax that is already there, used and appropriated for, and various counties have it. So I think there was a little misconception, and unfortunately we've kind of had to just let it lay where it is so that we don't overextend ourselves. But hopefully some information goes out there and people get it before the vote, and understand a lot of cities, not just us, what we use it for. It's become a part of our budget and how significant it is, so we're hoping for that, but just trying to stay within the confines of what we can and cannot do, so.
About 60% of the new Fire Station 35 is funded with this 1% surcharge fund for this year.
I
Do
just
we
think,
post signs up for that? Like school districts always, this is being funded by your penny sales tax or something like that. Are we doing any type of, that's a legitimate, allowed to be done?
That's a great idea.
I could ask, if you'd like, I put a comment there and ask PIO in the city manager's office if they do that. That's a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
school districts do it, and I know in Orange County, we post up these big signs, thank you for your penny sales tax supported this bill or whatever it is.
Like I
Yeah,
said,
they've not started construction yet, so I'm not sure there's a place to put it, but that's a good idea. And if it were to fail this time, they'll put it on the ballot again. They have until 2025. It expires in 2025 if it's not extended. So it doesn't end like right now, but we do have debt payments out of there. So I think we owe around $2 million of debt that goes back to 2010 for some Parks and Recs things. So we'll have to look at paying those off to prepare for potentially losing it if it doesn't pass.
If we could just put it back on the ballot, though, maybe we can come up with another plan to get that information out there to push it.
I'm relatively sure that the county will do that. And, the state as a whole. Municipalities depend on this money now. Vehicle replacements, anything like that, it's all going to have to come out of your general fund, so
Just gotta educate the public.
that's going to be
And that's the
problematic.
whole issue. No, I can promise you, no one's going, let me see what St. Cloud website looks like today
Yeah,
about the
and then-
finance. It ain't happening.
Maybe some type of mailer or something that we can do one time.
Sure, I will share with PIO in the city manager's office just the recommendations, of letting people know what has already maybe been funded through that, so people can connect, and then they can kind of handle what we can and cannot do. But I put that to let them know that recommendation, because they are working on the website right now to just update it and like I said, they've grabbed legal counsel what they can and cannot do. So, but I will share that with them as a recommendation from this council. I will never steer that you all are residents as well, and word of mouth is fluid and can achieve a lot as well. So,
And the ballot is pretty clear on what it's used for. Reviewing my sample ballot, if I didn't know anything about it, I would vote for it because it clearly states on there the type of things that it's being used for. So,
I think the misrepresentation of, is it 1 cent or 1% is what is making the stink. Remember, that's where the lawsuit is right now, I think.
yeah, I agree. Math messes people up a lot, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's only one way to represent 1%, and that's 0.01, right?
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think if we could have it our way and stuff, there's a clearer line. Again, we use common sense, and I think when you speak to people clearly, that things are clear. But I wish I had control of that. But hopefully that message does go out. A lot of times, at least in my experience here, I've seen a lot of rustle, and then people tend to settle down and talk to whoever, or somebody gets to them, and then it settles. And also, unfortunately, the masses don't go out to vote. It's just the few that hopefully educate themselves, and get it across. So we'll see that. Another part, just to share with you, like I said, I definitely not grim, just wanted to give you factual information, is that we are, of course, looking at all fees right now as far as, do they afford the business? Does it make logical sense? Because it should get reviewed every 5 years, and we're getting in that cyclical. This council meeting happening this week will be the second and final public hearing for park and public safety impact fees to increase them. And if that gets adopted, which we expect it should, those will take in effect 90 days from October 27th. And those increases will go. And that incorporated all the capital needs that we were calling on, most of them. We obviously have the capital of the public safety with debt, and that will be at a later, time. But a significant amount of capital infrastructure was included in that fee to support us through. So we're getting a little bit better. Much better, I think, with the part of fees affording the business. And so every department is, and with the implementation of a new city manager and her vision, we're starting to kind of organize that and get it in a good fluid motion here, so that we can, again, support the business and the services we provide.
When you refer to public safety, I know in the past, it used to be fire fees. Is this directed towards fire fees and ambulance fees, or is it encumbering the police as well? Do the police get this? Do the police have a tax for service now, or is it only responses by fire?
No, this is for both. So this is a police impact fee, for per residential that come in. And then fire has their fire fee for their capital needs and impact fees for their services that they provide. So it's two separate, public safety, but it's one for police, one for fire.
Both being increased, or one
Yes, sir.
over the other, but both are being?
Both are being increased, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so that will come into effect once adoption, like I said, in 90 days, which we wanted to get up there quickly so that it can be incorporated a little bit and we can see those gains in this current fiscal year. And that's really like the just kind of entire synopsis, that we're just not playing with numbers, but really looking at it, performance, and actually where we are. We're not, we're trying to be, again, not just mitigate, but long-term financial planning for this thing. And we feel we're in a good position. Just we've had some things, like we had the ARPA funds that came in. That's a one-shot, one-kill. We're done with that. So now for the next couple of years, making sure that we can afford the business. And that's, just kind of what we're assessing at this time. We'll get more into depth as we go with the budget. Like I said, we're going to be pulling the budget a little bit earlier just to get a handle of it. So just kind of be aware of that. And we'll go from there, So just, like I said, just giving you a economically tied just opinion, and what we're trying to accomplish here. So we'll get it to goal.
Can you guys enlighten me a little bit more on the building and the decrease in, you went from 90 to 100 to now to 37. What are we referring to? Residential? What are we? And because I'm not seeing any reduction in building and a reduction in traffic. So I'm kind of curious, where is this stopping? Because I know when I was on the planning board, we planned out construction years in advance. And I was at Gramercy Park, I think that was like 7-8 years, it seemed like but they seemed to stop. And we had that little recession back in 2008, and we went for quite a while before they started building again. So I don't know, can you give me where we're going with that and what's happening?
Well, it's paid building permits, so that's actual, revenue. Now, I know that David Tomac, our assistant city manager, has talked to some of the builders, and they still have big plans, but it's not equating to revenue in our coffers at this point in time. So the building that you're currently seeing are previously paid permits. So that would tell me that the level of building is going to slow in the coming months as they complete those residents that were paid back in June, July, August, but only 36 new building permits in the month of September, so that's 36 new houses, that's it, that were applied for permits in the month of September, and were about the same for the month of October. So as they complete the houses they're on, barring something changing, you will see a marked decrease in building. Now, you're not going to see any decrease in traffic because
There's nobody,
it's going to get worse because they're going to finish the houses and then people are going to move into them and then there's going to be 2 new cars on the road. So that's not going away, but
Sure.
the level of building will decrease in the coming months.
And most of our business, if you have to, kind of just to recall, is residential. We live on residential. We don't really have the commercial space. I went just a little step, just because I'm nosy and things bother me, is to the DRC meeting to just get the pulse of developers and hear them, what's the buzz, right? And the buzz is that as inflation rates, as you heard, go up, people cannot afford. The typical person right now, especially our new millennials starting new families and everything, cannot afford what is looking like a $389 to $400K home in St. Cloud. That mortgage right now that used to be about $2,200 is skyrocketed to almost $3,000. They can't afford it, so they're not building or buying new. So developers, from the buzz that I heard, and they shared with me is, yeah, we sold all these ones. We're trying to get those done to get, those permits in and paid and get those occupied. But we're not really getting a lot of sales in the future right now. They're not selling their new stuff. On top of that, they got the supply bottleneck where it's not about raw materials not being available. It's the transportation of those materials like lumber and coal. It's just expensive to where they're like, hey, I need to make my cash on the stuff I already got. So yeah, like for example, right now in the building department, we have a projection of deposit of about $1.8 million, but that's not money in the bank. That's saying, hey, we may pull these permits, right, and it's in escrow, but it's not cash dollars. And the problem we're having is because they're not getting those permits or finishing construction, whether it be a supply chain slow, they're not selling as fast as they thought. They need the cash money to be able to make payroll, to fund their operations, and that's just not happening at this point. So I think that's how it kind of all connects, because people talk about, yes, roads and traffic, but that's all your arrears, that's now coming through, not even your future just yet. And as we like to recall to people, things like, I know a lot of people would love to have that same traffic, but that traffic and those people are what's paying your new infrastructure, because those are the houses that are at levels. We need at least a minimum of $249,000 to pay the bill in the city. So people like in the grid, until they sell, they're not really paying their proportionate share for new infrastructure. It's all your Turtle Creeks and your new stuff, just the economics of things, right? So we're kind of working in arrears, with that. So you're seeing the I guess not the aftermath, but, all the permits that have come in from previous, and now all these, like I said, the developers are talking about trying to make their money because they've funded all this stuff. They need to get those homes filled. And the cadence of that is really difficult, So I think everybody's in that mode of not too much, just enough. Just to net. They're trying to net and get at least recapture. I think everybody's under that to just see, just because it's so just volatile as far as timing.
Are we okay with, it's been a while since I was on the planning board, but annexation was another issue. They were right on the city limits. I think where's it at? Old Hickory Tree around the bend by the canal. That's a huge subdivision. I'm assuming that's all county. But by Deer Run
Yes.
and Hickory Tree side, that's going to be a huge impact on us. But are we in that? I just don't know. We used to have problems. We've tried to aggressively, hey, let's annex this so we can get this revenue in. And then what happened, the county do it, get all the revenue. Oh, go ahead and annex now.
Yeah.
After it's all said and done. I just didn't know. Just kind of curious. I know we can't predict that out, but I just didn't know. Are we aggressively, hey, if we're annexing this stuff, that's going to be a huge impact. I forgot how many homes that is out there, but it's a massive.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to report that the city of St. Cloud has come a long way. We do have Metro Forecasting that's working with the Assistant Deputy, Mr. Tomac, right now. And what they've done is regionalize everything that, about the JPA, saying not only what revenue, but how much it costs us to sustain it and do it. So now that we can say, hey, this makes logical sense to come in, because doesn't matter, right? If we annex something and we can't put a fire station all that fast
It's
enough.
already done,
Yeah, so I think now we're getting towards the organized growth, not just taking stuff in and then, you know, what I think used to happen before was like, okay, and then the question is out there right now with this consultant that they're trying to analyze is, how big can we get? Like, when do we, you know, because a lot of people think we can stop at any point, but there's some things we can't. But also we have to do sustainability, and that's what this consultant is doing with Mr. Tomek's direction, where they're trying to analyze and look, okay, what makes logical sense now? I mean, they're going all the way up to like 2050s and 70s, 2070 long after we're here. But in the immediate, what's coming in and what makes logical sense by staff? Because do we have the staff to even do that? You know, the fire stations, the police coverage and all that. And that's being done at this moment with that consultant to get analytics and what makes logical sense as a you know, as a business to do. So.
Has there been, when you're talking with these developers, any focus on more, quote, businesses, coming into St. Cloud, trying to keep the locals here rather than having to travel wherever?
You know, I'll tell you what I've just spoken. I'm an embryo to the thing. So as a just commentary that people have had is that they feel that people want to come here because of what St. Cloud has, which is that green space, the lakes, the country living, right? It's really hard to get commercial over here because, you know, they feel like, what do you want, right? Because once you do commercial, then you get that traffic, that metropolitan, and you lose the essence of maybe what St. Cloud is. So that's what I've gotten as feedback, that it's a kind of a double-edged sword. Everybody wants development, but then development comes at a cost, and do we want that? Because it's kind of a hidden gem, right? You know, a lot of people used to call St. Cloud a bedroom town. I don't think so. You know, I think that it's just about what is it, where are we going to drive this thing? Are we going to, you know, everyone talks about dirt and how it's cheap and everything, but it's not that cheap anymore, you know? And so I think it's about selection now. What do we want to do? What makes logical sense? Because, you know, as a Los Angeles native, the traffic here makes me smirk, you know, but this is a reality for people here. It's big, right? And so I think they're trying to be cognizant of that and adding all these elements that I think the council does a great job, you know, making sure they have these items, you know, when they bring developments, that they respect the land and respect the nature, you know, because people like that, you know. So I think it's a cross in between. We need, commercial would be great. I mean, it's a finance director's dream, you know. I mean, we make money faster and quicker, but do we get it? I'm not sure, you know. And developers are kind of going with what people respond to, which they want to live here, you know. So
I think Nona's pulling that business. That's where they're building, that's, commercial's all up there, we're not, I don't see it happening too much here, I think Nona's taking it.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So
Anybody got any? Oh,
I
you got
do,
more
I have a question. So, you may not know this because you probably weren't here, but did the city predict how much a decline that happened in 2008? Did they predict that coming? Do you know?
From what I read, from the finance director's notes and everything, there was a lot of buzz about it. And they did advise, you know, and they tried to do what they could at that time. So I don't think they knew how deep it was going to go. But I did see, you know, like I said, just, you know, from a 30-year finance director here using his skill set, that they had advised, like, hey, we need to hold and watch for this. There's just a lot of things that weren't in play at that time, I think, you know, as far as like information and tying it, you know, and economic factors. I think, you know, I think the finance director was doing that, but I think with everything going on, it was just something they were trying to survive and do. And now you've gotten more, I guess, more rock and rolled on it, you know what I mean? And using that data analytics at ahead of time. So I think they knew enough because you made it and you kept everybody, you know, employed. So I think that's, you know, something, and you kept services. I think it's amazing. I think that overall, whether they had the analytics or not, I think they did plan the best, and it was a big team effort because, like I said, you see what they've done thus far, and they survived it with minimal impact and, you know, with growth that came out of nowhere and shot up, you know what I mean? So, you know, I think that they had enough information to know something. I just don't think that they had it. The portfolio wasn't that big at that time either, but they had enough, to know something was coming, and maybe not all the tools how to mitigate through it. But I think we never do. I mean, we don't have all the tools even right now. I could project all day long, and we can say something and it could just turn, but we shouldn't be that far off. I think that's what happened, is that they weren't that far off. They knew, and they just held and try to watch for best case scenario. Some things were out of their control, but it was just like COVID. We didn't know that, but just looking at trends, thankfully we did do our job, and I think I projected 25% lost revenue, and we hit 22.3. So I think everybody's done the same thing, is just taking what they have the best they can to prepare, because it's an art form, as we say, not not a science.
This is my concern is when we're talking about revenue, especially when it comes to taxes and stuff like that. Back in 2008, we didn't have a supply chain issue, and now we're seeing barges trapped in the Mississippi River. They're anticipating food rates are going to jump through the roof. Different outlets, not all outlets, but different outlets are saying once the midterm elections are over, they're expecting gas prices to jump back up. And this is going to affect people if they can pay their rent, because they got to pay for food, they got to pay more for gas. And,
Absolutely.
And people may be losing their homes, or they can't, or they have to move because they can't pay their rent or whatever. So that's like just something that would be a concern for me, because I'm thinking, okay, where's that revenue once that revenue disappears?
And it's a concern that, silently keeps me up at night. I will tell you that, because, in 2008, what you didn't have, you might have not had a supply chain boggle, but you still were a municipality. And as we know, there's a lot of people out there that will charge you $40 for a screw, right? Versus $1.20 for the local person, because it's a government, they got money. I will tell you now, with the players and what the directors are doing, and streamlining how contracting, the scrutiny of that, and verifying that we're getting the best for our buck, that's an added, from that. So you might have been also spending money inefficiently, and we've seen that, like right now we had so many open projects when we came on board that there was no way you were getting those things done. They were just open projects, and we've closed them down to make realistic expectations. And like I said, with conjunction and partnership with like procurement, who looks over a contract and says, hey, can we piggyback with somebody? Can we, do it in a different way, a CMAR and all that stuff. All the departments are kind of more together, I think, than before, where everybody was more siloed and doing their own thing, that I think it's going to have its fruits and labors. Because, that's what happened. I mean, right now, it's doubled what it costs you to feed a family of 4 right now, right? Meat, stock is out the way. But inflation is going up because people still have spendable income. And we're going to have a turn still, right? Because guess what happens right now in December? Taxes come into play, and people start filing their taxes, and guess what? Your spendable income. So the government is raising inflation to hopefully get you to stop spending income. And until those people don't, then it'll continue going. So it's a big thing. It's not just supply chain, and we're not always the biggest person, right? I mean, we got a war going on out there, right? So they're first. We got big contractors. We got huge companies that can pay for vehicles faster than we can, so they're going to get priority. So we're also not in the highest of the totem pole, too. So all those factors. But I think if we focused on all of them, like we always say, we got a dirty garage and stuff, we try to focus on the mess in the corner and start there, because if we thought of it all, I'm like, we would never we're going to try to ballpark it as best as we can, taking in that consideration. But, I think right now, like I said, it's about not a hold pattern, but we got to stay within our means, right, and stay there. So I just kind of say that to you as committee members, when you look at things, that it's not about it's maybe not right now, is that the labor's doubled in less than 12 months.
Historically, things, when I was on the board, I've been on the board since '04, I believe. And it's like she said, they didn't predict such a huge thing, but if you remember being in the cities and stuff, when someone retired or quit, we weren't hiring them. Right. We went a huge So we were getting slammed in other aspects. City was trying to prep and do, and then we just really had to tighten the reins up. And we weren't, I know in our city, we weren't getting raises for, it was like 5 years, it seemed like, that we went without raises. But they kept the city afloat and everything going, but it was economic time. People were losing their houses. Foreclosure was off the charts. And so, same thing she's speaking of, it was Mike Turner, I believe, back then. And Mike would be, you know, he's very, again, very good at what he does, trying to just say, let's do this, and just you're realigning and readjusting. And it was, when we'd had our budget meetings were we had 2 days, a lot of time of budget meetings in July. I'm talking like full days into the night. It's different times, different aspects, supply chain versus people losing houses and not refilling jobs. So now law enforcement and fire, I mean, we're down to minimum staffing. And so it was just different, but they are doing exactly what I'm anticipating coming up in January. We're going to be sitting back going, hey, let's do our crystal ball the best we can. And we're not cutting services, but we're fine tuning what we have. And I think it's cycles of this and how well they do their jobs, and city manager and all going, hey, this is what we got. We can't be going, you know, hey, let's spending this. We're struggling with, I know, remember in a meeting we had about equipment, fire trucks and stuff that costing so much money, and that's supply chain. So I think it's just different than what it was, the housing, but it was still it was some trying times. Imagine, again, people losing their houses, working here in the city, employees having to just go find an apartment, and I mean, it was just crazy what the housing market was happening at that time, and it affected the city big time. And I remember, again, Kissimmee, we were up to like 150 sworn, went down to like 110. So that wasn't, we didn't lay anybody off. We just, okay, thank you for your service. You retire, you're leaving. You want to go to Orlando, thank you. And now they're building back up. Same thing, we're building back up to what we have here. I just think it's different, but it was still a struggle for the city. And we really count on their talents to keep everybody, I mean, insurance rates, it was all just a mess. It's just different things we have to do, and they have to manage that. So it's just cycles. I'm hoping that they continue, and that's what when they come in and we start having our meetings, and then we have that big budget meeting in June, and if it's June next year, we're probably going to see definitely probably no raises type of deal. We're probably not going to, hopefully, no increases in insurances, but who knows, because they're just going to try to balance out the best they can. But I can see the tightening of the reins coming for the next few years, no doubt, until this thing straightens out. It could be 2 to 4 years easily. I remember it was a struggle in 08, 09, 10. It took us a while to start getting back on track and getting money back out and doing things. So
Another question, and you might not, might not be the forum for it, but let's say, God forbid, we do die like in 2008, and people can't pay their taxes, or they can't afford to pay someone to cut their lawn anymore, and they're getting fines from the city and stuff like that. Do you cut them some slack? I mean, how are the citizens treated in a situation as bad as 2008?
I think I'll answer in the way I've seen our current city manager and our previous city manager handle, is that they keep the resident at the forefront, and they have, like when a hurricane has happened, they waived fees to help the resident out because they were struggling. They pump money into the city as much as they can help, like they've done with Cloud Cash right now with construction and things that affect the residents. So I will say that I'm pretty sure this regime would find ways to maybe waive that are business smart, because we got to still run a business. But I would just imagine, and I'll get confirmation from the city manager what would be her approach on this. But I've seen her already that she never steers to anything other than protecting not only the residents but the employees. So I would see that she would probably help in any way she can. Any feasible fee that we didn't need to survive, I would see her mitigate that and probably ask, hey, can we not charge it to help residents out as much as we could? I would expect that from her, you know. Yeah, and she does the same for employees. She did it in this last hurricane. She waived debris pickup for residents because it was a hurricane and, you know, it wasn't really an impact to us, if you could say that, but she was like, nope. She was, you know, she's very cognizant of the residents and the employees. So I think she's also historically been through those times, so I know she knows what that feels like and what that is, and I think she'll have us rub our heads together as hard as we can to avoid any situation, and that's our goal, is not to have her have to go endure that, you know, because that's a tough management as well. But like I said, I will check with her, but I can say what I've seen already and just how she is from working. Yeah, she would not charge unnecessary fees at that time and would be considerate to the residents. Yeah.
She's got a good history. I mean, she was a planner back when I was on the planning board a decade or more ago. So she was on the planning. So she's worked her way through the city. So she has a lot of historical knowledge and background. So I'm hoping that, again, I don't know how she's going to be as a city manager. I'm anticipating her doing well. But due to her, she understands from the planning phases that she dealt with and then all her moving around throughout the city. I think she's got a well-rounded approach, I'm assuming, from what she's gathered over her time here. She's not an outsider coming in and let's see how to do it. She's been here for probably 15 years or more, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
she is all St. Cloud.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so-
She loves this city.
So I'm hoping, again, it's a collaborative effort. I'm sure finance really runs, and then or the city manager just kind of keeps people in check and helps with their direction and guidance. So I'm hoping that you're right, you're gonna see those times. I foresee it being a struggle well into next year and the following year. I think 23, 24 is gonna be a challenging time for us as a city, as a country. So see how it goes. I'm confident that we will get through it pretty, the best that we can.
Absolutely. I firmly believe that. And, I think both our years of experience will help us get through some strategy or something on top of just the partnership we have with, all the people that work here, the staff just really cares and would be people that, would help us, if we needed just, again, another perspective, I've personally been through it in both municipalities and the private sector and have been through 8 rounds of layoffs, with a company, and it's very enduring for a CEO and very enduring for staff, and and it's a hard position for finance to be. You tend to not disclose where you park that day and things of that nature. It's just trying times, right? So you kind of keep that in the memory and try to make sure that, I think, like I said, all the avenues we've taken, it's not really critical that I'm saying this. It's more just to give you a true perspective, because we have decisions that happen at this table when you take in considerations like budget, where we always want to give pay raises and things, but we also have to remember, and I tell you more for the business, sense and decisions you have to make or recommend to the council, because like I said, I'd love to fill everybody's dreams and wishes, but from a business perspective, we got to do what's right to make sure we provide the services for the city and, are cognizant of the residents' money and how we manage that. So.
Going back to a statement you said about the Parks and Rec, you're still making up $2 million from that $6 million 1 cent sales tax. And you said it was from 2010. How long do you usually finance things like that? Because that seems like a long time to finance something,
Most of the time when we do anything that's bond-related debt, it's probably for a huge project or infrastructure. It could have been in conjunction with a roadway or whatever. Normally, we bridge it for 20 to 30 years, depending on what it is, So I don't have all the details of what that debt encountered, so we can get you that. But most of the time, we're not going to get into debt for dollars and cents. It's normally for a project that is in conjunction with either a roadway trails. It's not like your capital infrastructure that would happen like this year, you know, where you would do a Cannery Park, let's say. This is probably for a huge like mitigation or Canoe Creek roads, things like that were in conjunction, and they're normally based on what we leverage will be like minimum 20 to 30 years. That's minimum for a bond. You know, it wouldn't make any logical sense, and we wouldn't get financed for anything less. You know, it's just the time frame to pay that back. So it's probably a very huge tranche that was done back in the day. I believe it's related to Nolte or something like that. I can't remember, but I'll get you the details as to why and the amount, because it's
Yeah.
multiple things probably.
Well, just, he said it was a park, so I was just saying, that seems like if you've been paying on it 12 years already and you still owe 2 million, it seems like for a park that was a huge chunk of money, you know?
Yeah,
That's what makes our city somewhat very attractive, is the things that we can offer
Yeah.
people who have lived in high-density areas to be able to have beautiful parks, and at the same time as we just find out we need a whole nother park with a swimming pool. And that would not be a 3-year bond initiative.
sure. I will tell you that I doubt it's like a park. It's probably multiple items within that, and it had a park item or something like that, you know, but I know there's multiple, because, for example, if you think of what we just did with the ranch, right, that was 229 acres at $5.9 million. We didn't debt it out. We paid it straight up with impact fees. So when we hate debt, hate it, just, you know, so we avoid it at all costs. And if we're going to get into debt, it would be something like public service complex, $40 million. That's going to be a 40-year call. You know what I mean? Things like that. Arterial roadways, you know, because one roadway project could be $20 million, you know what I mean? And that makes logical sense, you know? So things like that. So we'll get you the details to that, because unfortunately I don't know all of it by heart.
That was way before both our
Yeah.
times.
So we can get you, so you could see what, you know, and just have a comfort level of what's in that, you know? It's listed in the ACFR, so we'll get you that, as well as schedule and everything, what we pay for it, so you could see. But I know it's a combination of multiple items, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's nothing simple. Usually like a Nolte project or some massive project, like I was on a committee, that's been a couple of years now, for the public safety. It started at, I think, at 33 million, and now it's up to 40 million, if that's something. That's their bonds and all the stuff that they had to do is gonna be, it's like a house. You're gonna be paying for that for decades, because it's huge. And so they gotta work their magic even to get that to happen. But some projects that they do, like I know Nolte was a massive project.
Well, on a positive note on the topic of debt, you know, with the EU transition, we did close on that debt, and so EU did take on all that debt. We are debt-free from the utility side. That was $34 million, so it's fantastic news, you know. So, like I said, we'll get you the history so you know. But yeah, it's normally, we don't do it unless it's a big initiative. You know, there's no sense. They wouldn't even look at us anyway. They'd be like, what for? You don't need it. And we should have it in the coffers if, you know, it's what we call, you know, non-material items. But like I said, for example, that park was $5 million. We had it in cash, right? So why debt out? There's no need. And we've reduced budget, if you look at it. Back in 2010, big debt that happened. It just needed to. There was roads, there was Nolte, there was Canoe, there was a couple things. And now, you know, over half that debt's been paid off after a couple of years, and we're in a nice position with that, and we continue to be stronger with that. So 23, 24 is a big, 23 going into 24, but really we're prepping for 24, 25. It's going to be a big infrastructure year, like things are getting old. And that, you know, that's with roadways, right? And that's a big one that we have to focus on. Just our assets are just getting a little older, and they're starting to reach those times where we need to reinvest, you know, so.
How's, I guess Osceola County's decided they're gonna spend, what, 700 and some million dollars on roads in the next 5 years? How does that affect us? Is that gonna help us?
From what I've known and I've heard, we have a transportation manager and they work with planning, works with Osceola County, that that project is all huge, major roadways that are under the charge of Osceola County, but some of them might walk into what we need here in St. Cloud as arterial roads that connect and everything, and they're trying to do a partnership, because they're working with them now.
They said Neptune was gonna get.
Neptune was one of them.
Part in settlement.
Yeah, so I know that there's partnerships being worked out of what makes logical sense, because sometimes residents don't know that the reason we don't do a road is because it's not under county and, or city, but also because those projects, I mean, a lot of people see and they're like, oh, you got money for roads, go ahead, but one project is like everything we got, so partnering, we have to, you know what I mean? So, and some of them we just can't do the work because they don't fall under our jurisdiction, but I know this regime and organization is now moving towards what's the right thing to do for the city versus, because they're working in partnership to say like, hey, let us help you out, you help us out, to get this done for the community, so I think that's the approach.
That's where the turnpike exit is right now.
That's right. Yes, I've heard that one, and I see it on Osceola Rants and Raves going in Narcoossee, and I don't know what this looked like years and years ago, but people are getting really upset about it, so.
Years and years ago, it looked like a 2-lane road with like 5 cars in front of you.
Yeah.
Well, even less, I go to work in Kissimmee, and it used to take me 15 minutes to get to work. Now it takes me about 45.
Sure.
It's a big difference.
Is that all?
That's it, yeah.
The roadway
So what's your
issue,
problem?
the roadway issues we were having in the past is like, we'll just say Neptune. The county, if they choose to do it, the turnpike is run by the state.
Yeah,
So we
that's
had
what
the
I'm
issues
saying.
in different areas, so they would have to get with the state, where do we fall in the ranking for the state to widen or fix the bridge? They can widen the road all the way on Neptune for county, but then we got a state bridge that we gotta expand, and then that affects the turnpike.
Yeah.
There's
See,
more
that's
to
what
it.
I'm thinking that she was talking about, that you got a partner, and I think the 3 county, state, and city, it has still got to get together on.
It's a priority
all this
thing.
stuff,
You
yes.
gotta understand, just like starts, all roadways and everything, infrastructure of county starts at Disney. And then it works and trickles its way back to us. Where do we rank in that? And then you got the state. Okay, where's the state? Where does St. Cloud fall in all these other issues, Jacksonville, Orlando, fixing these roadways? And so it's all, I know they all want to try to do the best they can, but hopefully in the future we can get some of that. The county, obviously, they got the budget but it's a collaborative effort all the way around. They got to give it to state. It's not as simple because people don't understand. It's city only covers, we'll say state streets. Well, we can work on some state streets, but some of the other areas that's county run. And we don't have access to dealing with certain parts of Neptune Road.
Yeah, but they're
So-
definitely working on, there's no way to do it other than with partnerships and stuff. And then we didn't have like a transportation manager before, and man, she's one of the brightest minds I've ever seen. I love to hear her. You can spend hours talking about transportation with her and stuff. She's just a gifted mind. And then, again, with the city manager and her planning background and, them kind of partnering and having those discussions, I see a big future for that to help us, because honestly, we only have so much, and these roadway projects are incredible what they go through. And forget about it, that's not even factoring in material, that's just to do it. I think 2 major projects that weren't even huge for us would have ate everything up we had in mobility in one project. It was like 20 million, like gone like that. So we have to partner, and they're working on that, and I think they're making a lot of groundwork. They're working on mobility fees with Mr. Tomek coming from Osceola County. That's been a big, help to bridge that. So I see some good things coming from that, for sure,
Does anybody have any other questions for staff?
Thank you, very enlightening.
As usual, outstanding job. Appreciate everyone's time today, and the questions are all very valid, and that's what we do as a board. We are supposed to question what they do, what the city does, because we are invested as members of the city. So I appreciate everyone asking questions, and I've never gotten any pushback from staff at all. They've always been, okay, let's see what we can figure out. So don't ever hesitate when you're at home or you're hearing things out in the community at your jobs. Write it down, memorize it, and then when we come in January, go, hey, I heard this, what's going on with this? And I don't know, but again, Wendy is always, anytime we need it, we get that information pretty quickly, if not before our meeting, when our next meeting comes. So I do appreciate you guys. It tells me you're listening, you're concerned, and that's huge. We need strong members to make sure that everyone's accountable. And that's what we're doing. So I appreciate you guys for doing that and spending the time and making those efforts. Looks like our next meeting, if you put it in your calendar, will be January 24th. Let's see at the next page if there's anything else. Obviously, no audience participation. Any other comments from you guys? Concerns, anything?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, appreciate you guys. If there is nothing, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.